Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of TechteamGB. Today we're going to take a look at the Fractal design Node 605. Stay tuned.
Check out our website at TechteamGB.co.uk for more info on both this and many other products, and also up-to-date news on all things tech. Stick around for this awesome video.
Okay guys, to kick this review off, we're going to begin by taking a look around this stunning front panel. It's made up of one solid piece of brushed aluminium, which is about 5mm thick, which definitely makes the case a little front heavy, but also gives it an incredible look. On the front you see you have a little power button that has a satisfying tactile click to let you know it's been pressed. Also on the front right you see a small Fractal design logo, which is subtle enough that it doesn't stick out too much, but is there to let your enthusiast friends know what this thing actually is. Now before we jump into the front panel connections, seeing as you can see them from the front, the case feet follow the same brushed metal design, which definitely enhances the case's premium look. Now possibly one of the coolest parts of the case is the way in which the front panel I/O is hidden. The lower third of the front is a little door held in place by two magnets, which once pulled by the neatly placed finger grooves slowly lowers to reveal your I/O. I have to admit, I literally sat in front of this thing for like 10 minutes opening and closing it because it's so freaking sweet how it's done. Now the front panel I/O is made up of a card reader which comprises a compact flash, micro SD and standard size SD card port, two USB 3.0 ports, headphone and microphone jack, as well as a Firewire port, which is pretty random and I have no idea why they decided to put this here. I'd have much preferred if they used something like a USB 2.0 port. Yes, it's slower than USB 3.0 but it's actually useful. There's also a 5¼ inch slimline drive bay. I'd probably just leave this blank to be honest because it looks pretty nice and it follows with the brushed metal style. On the right hand side of the case you can see you have two spots to mount 120mm fans. One of them already has a pre-installed Fractal fan that seems to blow a decent amount of air. It's just your bog standard stock fan, so don't expect anything amazing, but it does the job just fine. At the front of this side panel you can also see you have a three-way rocker switch which allows you to connect up to 3 fans, so if you wanted to you could throw another fan in here and connect it up to the fan controller without any issues. On the left hand side panel it looks pretty much identical to the other side, although one of the 120mm fan mounts is swapped out for your vent for your PSU. Now before we delve onto the inside of the case, I just want to take a second to look at the really nice powder coating job that Fractal done on this case, so definitely a thumbs up there to them. On the rear panel you have two spots to mount 80mm fans, which I would probably just leave blank because most 80mm fans can be quite loud and whiny. There's a cutout for your rear I/O as you'd probably expect. There are 7 PCI expansion slots that can be removed, but you first have to take the cover out. In usual Fractal fashion they follow the ice white theme, which is really nice. Also in the back there is a cutout for your standard ATX PSU mount. Now onto the inside of the PC case, the top panel has a really dense piece of sound dampening foam that should help deaden any noise let out by your computer. We'll definitely be testing this in a bit more depth later and see how much this actually helps. The top panel is also really sturdy and barely wobbles at all, which is definitely a testimony to the build quality of this case. Now I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this case wasn't particularly easy to build in, nor was it particularly easy to cable manage, and I must admit the cable managing job doesn't look particularly great, but then again you've got to remember it's not like it's going to be a computer that's got a big window in it that's in show, so it doesn't really particularly matter what it looks like on the inside. Obviously if you do a bit of a better cable management job you're going to get a bit better airflow, so if you wanted to you could spend a bit more time on it. Obviously I'm just building in it and then going to rip it apart, so I didn't spend a massive amount of time. It wasn't the hardest case ever to build in, although it definitely wasn't the easiest experience either. Saying that though, I did manage to fit a 270X in and a full-sized ATX motherboard, which actually made this computer a fairly viable home gaming PC, which we'll be definitely taking a look at in a later video. To mount the graphics card, I did have to remove one of the hard drive mounts simply because there wasn't enough space to fit the thing in there. It would just run into the back of one of the hard drive mounts. Now on the inside left of the case you can see you have that 120mm fan that we talked about earlier. It's also got a fan guard over it which should help stop any cables getting stuck inside it. You can also see you have your mount for your standard ATX PSU. Now on the right hand side you can see you have two 120mm fans. Only one of these is actually included. I decided to put another one in there simply because we are running quite a high-end hardware and we didn't want to run into any cooling issues. But these fans are quite cheap and readily available, so if you wanted to get the same fans you could just pick up another one like I did. One thing that I really like about Fractal cases is that there's no ALC 97 tuner on the HD audio, which is great because it means you don't have to cut it off and it doesn't look massively ugly. Also you have a silly Firewire cable which we picked up earlier on the front panel, which I realised if you actually pull it hard enough it actually comes out and unplugs from the PCB because it pulls the hot glue off, which you can then conveniently throw straight into the bin. Now onto the hard drive bays. They allow for either two 3.5 inch drives or two SSDs to be installed in either one of them, allowing for a total of up to 4 drives, which should be plenty for a home media PC. They aren't of the tallest design, so you will have to use screws to hold them in, which might be a problem for some people. I personally don't really care. They've got rubber mounts in them, so it should help reduce vibrations on hard drives. In the middle of the case is a metal support bar, which should help add some structural rigidity, as well as obviously the second mounting point for the hard drive cages. One thing is, I noticed that part of the paint had been worn off the bar around the screw area. Wasn't really much of an issue at all, although I did notice it, so I thought I'd mention it. Now, the feet on a product is definitely something that I find particularly important, especially on PC cases. Thankfully, these ones do a great job of keeping the case still. One thing I noticed though, that the back two are of a cheaper variety. It would have been nicer if they, included 4 of the same feet, just to help enhance that premium quality just a little bit further. So it wasn't much of an issue at all, and you can't even see the back two from the front, but it was definitely something that I picked up on. Now, seeing as this case is meant for a home media PC, it's important that it's relatively quiet. Now, I didn't have a decibel meter, which would have been the most scientific way of testing this, so instead I used the microphone that I'm using currently, which is a Zoom H5, to measure the sound, the ambient sound, and then I'll switch the case on just so you can hear how it sounds. So I'll be quiet now so you can hear how it sounds. Now, as you can hear, there's quite an audible difference between the high and low modes. The case itself is actually pretty quiet. It's louder now I listen to it back, but obviously if you had a film on or something like that, you probably wouldn't hear the case at all. What I would probably do though is just change out all the fans, so perhaps something like a Noctua, NFF12 or something like that. Just a really high-end fan that you can run on a really low speed, like 8 volts or something like that, which would definitely make the case just completely dead silent. Now to my overall opinions of the case. As home media PC cases go, this is probably one of the best I've ever seen. It just looks absolutely stunning, and if there is any negative part about it, that pretty much makes up for it. That brushed front panel just looks incredible. There really wasn't anything bad about the case at all. Probably the worst was the building experience, and that's down to a couple of things. One, the fact that it's so small, so you can't really make up for that. And the other fact is that I decided to put a full-size ATX board in there. If anyone was deciding to build in this, I'd probably recommend getting something like an APU, whether that be of the AMD or Intel variety, and then getting an M-ATX board. You probably wouldn't even need a dedicated graphics card if you've got a decent enough APU, and that would, help with temperatures as well as power consumption. So that'd definitely be what I would go for. So the building experience wasn't great, but then that was probably down to my own fault. Really, overall, I actually think this is probably one of the best home media PC cases you can actually get. Now on to my overall scores. For value for money, I'm going to give it a 4. It's quite an expensive case, although obviously it's very premium looking, so if you're looking for a premium case, then I would probably give this a 5 for value for money. But there are cheaper home media PC cases out there that do a similar job, so for value for money I'm going to give it a 4. For performance I'm going to give it a 5 because it supports full-size ATX boards, it didn't have any temperature issues, it's quiet, it's great. For functionality I'm going to give it a 5, as for a home media PC case it does everything that I'd want it to do. For style, it's definitely going to be a 5 because the thing just looks amazing, and I haven't stopped talking about how amazing it looks. And as an overall TechteamGB score, if you didn't already guess it, it's going to be a 5 because this is probably one of the best home media PC cases I think you could buy. Also, because I love this case so much, I'm going to give it the TechteamGB Approved Award.